So, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Thanks for being here. Today, we're talking about the World Fair case study on plant-pollinator interactions. If you're interested in the project, please visit our website, worldfairproject.eu. Some very quick housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded. The recording will be shared with you after the meeting and also on the project's YouTube channel and on our website. Please post any questions in the chat during the presentation. There will be a Q&A section at the very end. So, about the World Fair project. It is a 2-year European Commission-funded project aiming to advance implementation of the FAIR principles in a range of disciplines, but also cross-disciplinary research areas. It is led by CoData, with RDA as a major partner. The project aims to join up disconnected initiatives on data management, data stewardship, and fair data practices within and across disciplines, and also internationally by utilizing 11 case studies. The project is also working on what we call synthesis activities. These are the FAIR implementation profiles, work on the cross-domain interoperability framework, and the production of recommendations for domain-sensitive FAIR assessment. This set of activities aims to ensure alignment of the activities across these case studies, and is aiming to extrapolate cross-domain and domain-independent recommendations. This is the list of our partners, just to give you an idea of their international and authoritative nature. So today we're talking about agricultural biodiversity, which is one of our 11 case studies. This case study was conceived within the RDA Improving Global Agricultural Data Community of Practice, which identified initiatives related to plant-pollinator data standardization and assembled a team to collaborate on enabling FAIR data. And this team is led by Embrapa, with other key partners being the Maize Botanic Garden, Hive Tracks, and the CalRO, and of course the RDA Association. This case study is working on ensuring broad participation and alignment with other agricultural data initiatives at the global level to facilitate the implementation of FAIR data principles. Our speaker today is Debora Drucker, the work package lead for the Agricultural Biodiversity case study. Among other qualifications, Debora holds a PhD in Environment and Society. She has experience in the areas of forestry, ecology, sustainable use of natural resources, ecoinformatics, and data management. Debora works at Embrapa at the Agricultural Informatics Research Center. So we're here today as part of the RDA's 10-year anniversary event series, and Debora will talk about their findings from their discovery phase, FAIR assessments, good practices, tools, and examples to create, manage, and share data related to plant-pollinator interactions. The first deliverable of this case study was recently published. It is the report on agriculture-related pollinator data standards use cases, and it is available on Zenodo. I will put the link in the chat after this. Before I pass the floor on to Debora, I'd like to bring your attention to the World Fair Project webinar series, which started in May 2023 and is running all the way to May 2024. We've already held a number of webinars, and in September, we have at least two webinars coming up, one on chemistry and nanomaterials, and one on biodiversity and agriculture. And during that second webinar on the 20th of September, Debora and her colleagues will speak more about their deliverable that I just mentioned. You can find out more about this webinar series, about our upcoming dates, and the recordings of the webinars that have already taken place on our website, which I will also put in the chat. So, Debora, on to you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you all for being here today. So it's an honor to be here. I hope you can see my screen. Yes? Okay, thank you. So I work as a data manager at Embrapa, the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, as Alex mentioned, and it's my honor to be here in the as part of the celebration of the 10-year anniversary of the Research Data Alliance, especially because our case study was born within the IGAD community of practice, the Improving Agricultural Data, the first community of practice of RDA. just a minute. So we, as a community, we gather several initiatives, and we realized there was a huge interest in plant pollination data worldwide. So to name a few, we have the Biodiversity Information Standards, the CADWIC community, and there is a biological interaction data interest group, and pollination is one kind of interaction. And there is also this project, the Surpass2 project, which is a collaboration between many countries in South America with the UK. And so we gather many organizations that were interested in working on pollinator data. And to name the direct beneficiaries here, we have Embrapa, we have the Maize Botanic Garden, which was the institution that coordinated this first deliverable. We have the Kenyan Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization, KAURO, the Hivetrax, which is a startup that works with beekeepers, and also the RDA Association as partners in this case study. And we have several collaborators from several organizations worldwide working with us. So this was truly born within RDA, so we really thought it was important for us to celebrate the anniversary and show what we are doing. So why we decided to work with plant pollinator data? It's because of its major importance. So the majority of the flowering plants are animal pollinated, and there are estimates that without pollinators, 1/3 of the angiosperm would produce 0 seeds, and half would have 80% or more reduction. So this slide was simply built by Jeff Arlerton, which is also a partner here with us in our work package, and so is the next one. I think he's here in the audience, so thank you, Jeff. Also, plant pollinator interactions support most terrestrial ecosystem and animal populations. And as many as 1 in 10 describe terrestrial vertebrates, and invertebrates may function as pollinators. And more specifically regarding agriculture, 75 of most productive crop plants are animal pollinated, accounting for 35% of worldwide yield. And this number is similar to the estimate made at the assessment on pollinators and food production in Brazil. This work was carried out by members of the Brazilian network of the plant pollination interactions. And they also estimated the value of the pollination service around what would be 8.4 billion euro in the year of 2018. So plant pollinator data is crucial to understand and maintain ecosystems, crops, and food production. And it's clear that it underpins the sustainable development goals which apply to countries worldwide. And also it was the subject of one of the IPBES first major assessment. The IPBES assessment report on pollinators, pollination, and food production, and it explicitly identified major data gaps. This is the assessment if you are interested. So our case study, it has 3 main tasks, and respective deliverables. So we just finished the discovery phase. Our main goal is to ensure fair data for understanding plant-pollinator interactions at biologically relevant scales for crops. And we conducted this landscape analysis that I will talk more today. And we are just starting the pilot phase and the assessment and metrics tasks, which I will also talk a little bit more. So if you are interested, this is the report that Alex mentioned and I'm also talking about. I really invite you to take a look at it, and we won't have time for me to explore everything that we documented there, but I will present the main findings. It was published last month. So we conducted this analysis with two approaches, an automated data approach, and we also did a manual search and also looked for people interested on collaborating and found data worldwide. And the data that we found manually, we entered in Zenodo, and the first finding that we had is that we found about 8,700 unique data sets in these main repositories, and it's been increasing in the last few years. So if we think about the FAIR principles, you can see more in detail in the report, but the most frequently used license is CC BY. But there are many, there is a high proportion, more than 50%, that does not have any license attached to them. And there are also a high proportion of public domain licenses that we don't know if they are aware that the license is CC0, if it was voluntarily added. We also found that in some cases the DOI is kind of reused. So we have the same DOI for the publication and the data set that is attached to the publication. So that's not really what the FAIR principles are about. So there is many space for improvement. And we also found that most of the data sets that have 0 citations, about 80%. And if we think about the file formats, the analysis revealed a notable lack of standardizations in terms of files and formats. In this first graph here, we noticed that most of the files are JPEG pictures, and this is mainly from Flickr. And if we exclude this, we can come to more files with plain text or Microsoft Excel. We find really dozens of different file formats. So the data can be extremely heterogeneous. It's difficult to interpret and it's largely unavailable. And although it's changing, most researchers still rely a lot on spreadsheets to document the data. And especially in the tropics, but everywhere, biodiversity data is a valuable asset and it should be preserved and shared as much as possible. So I will make a little journey through time here, because Plant-pollinator is a kind of biodiversity data. And if we think 30 years ago, the countries agree on the Convention of Biological Diversity. And the definition of biological diversity is the variability among living organisms from all sources, including inter alia, terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems, and the ecological complex of which they are part. This includes the diversity within species, between species, and of ecosystems. So if we continue this journey through time, we will find this special volume of the Science magazine in the year 2000, exploring what was the emerging topic of bioinformatics for biodiversity. And talking about this quiet, in this specific viewpoint article from Frank Spivey, he talked about the quiet, what he called the quiet revolution of the biodiversity informatics in the internet. And he said that the internet could, the advances on biodiversity informatics would lead the internet into a giant biodiversity information system. And in the same number of the Science journal, we have this article presenting GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which is the main source of biodiversity data nowadays. And by that time, we see that the minimum considered for biodiversity data would be the scientific name of the specimen and when and where it was collected by whom. And we can really say that it was a revolution because today we have more than 2 billion occurrences records in GBIF. Checked this last week, and it's really an amazing job. We really have a huge amount of data gathered by GBIF on biodiversity. And if we take a look, what we find mainly is the scientific name, the where, and the when. And this is really valuable, but the data model that is used nowadays and the index system does not fully accommodate the representation of biotic interactions data. So if we go back to the Convention of Biological Diversity, we see that we still have to address the part of the ecological complexes of which they are part and the diversities between species in the case of interactions. And it also says in the convention that the combination of life forms and the interactions with each other and with the rest of the environment is that has made Earth a unique habitable place for humans. So we really need to go beyond the who, when, and where. And we have been working on that. So this challenge was addressed in this article led by José Salim, which is also our team member in this case study. And for those that are not so familiar with what interactions data are or pollinator data are, we have these basic components: the co-occurrence, the encounter, and the outcome. We really need to document this properly. So, as I said, the current biodiversity data standards do not provide terms for documenting interactions. So we need to have the trinomial, which is the two binomials, the two species, the interaction type, and for pollination that can be different because what we really see is the visit, and it's we only can say the pollinator occurred if we have the outcome, which is the fertilization, and that's the effect. So it's really a process, but we observe the events. We have this events, which are the snapshots of the interaction process. And we need to have as much events as possible so we can really understand the process. So we need to standardize this data and be able to integrate and understand the process. So our approach, the one led by José Salim, is based on the Darwin Core, which is the most widely used standard for biodiversity data on the event class, more specifically. So we have this interaction schema. It is in our article and also in the report. So the event core is the basis of the model. We use the measurement of facts to record the event details, the results, the effects, and the outcomes. We use the occurrences to record the tetranymal, the two species that are interacting. And we use measurement of fact associated with these occurrences to record the organisms details, the animal and the plant, the traits, the behaviors, the quantities. All of those are important for us to understand plant pollination processes. And we also use the resource relationship statement to record the interaction type and its direction. And interestingly and timely, we have the GBIF working on the unified data model. And one of the approaches is on biotic interactions. And when we see the conceptual model that GBIF proposed for biotic interactions and for the unified model as a whole, event is also the basis. So we are seeing much similarity and conversion between our approach and the approach by GBIF. And we are going to explore both approaches and converging, hopefully converge to a proposal in this next phase that is the pilot phase that's starting now. It's important to mention also that we also need a vocabulary to document the traits and the interactions details. And in the same paper that we proposed the model, we proposed a vocabulary. And we're also going to explore the vocabulary. We are already doing that in the pilot phase. We have 48 terms, and it's distributed in animal, plant, flower, interaction, reproductive success, and nectar dynamic. And they are using the measurement of type part of the Darwin Core standard. So all of those are described in detail in the article itself, and also in the report, the deliverable 10.1. And also, it's important to mention that we are collaborating with GLOBI, the Global Biotic Interactions Initiative, which is an amazing source of interaction data that many of you may know. It aggregates and exposes biotic interactions, data sets, reuse ontologies and vocabularies. There is also a very important part of the data process, which is the taxonomic matching. We describe this in more detail in the deliverable. So, as you may know, taxonomy is a living science, and all the time the names of species, which are entities, they are changing because with science as science evolves, we find that some species that we consider different entities are the same or they split, and it's very hard to keep track of all these even through time, and sometimes we find different names representing the same taxonomic entity, and GLOBE has a very nice set of tools to work with this taxonomic matching, and we are also going to explore that in the pilot phase. Now we found 53 datasets in GLOBE that has either the visit flowers interaction type or the pollinates interaction type. And we are collaborating with GLOBE to also work closely with this amazing initiative to fulfill our objective of really making data on plant pollination more available and fair. So to summarize, we found that the huge amount of data on Plant-pollinator is in supplementary files of research articles. Most of them are lacking fairness in many aspects, like the data formats, the lack of semantic resources, the need to read the paper in many cases. This requires expertise to understand the data. And there is also the paywall that many journals have. So the data is not really open access. So we find that this is a huge challenge for researchers, for data admins, for editorial boards of scientific journals, publishers, and scientific society. So whether the data is fed in the supplementary files, or we can find them at GBIF and GLOBE, but we still need to improve our ability to describe plant-pollinator interactions. And that's what we are going to do in the next phase, the pilot phase that we are running right now. We are working on 5 pilot studies to document the data in the Darwin-Core plant-pollinator interaction schema that we proposed in José Salim's article and that I showed today. We are also going to use the GBIF unified data model approach and see the differences and convergences between them. We are also advancing semantics with the plant-pollinator interactions vocabulary, and that's something that we are also working on better formalizing. And this has connection here to the cross-domain interoperability framework, which is one of the main objectives of the WorldFAIR project. And we are also collaborating with GLOBE to mobilize data and make it more available. As Alex mentioned, in about a month, in September 2020, we are going to have this webinar with GBIF, which is leading work package 9 in the WorldFAIR project, and then we are going to discuss more in detail the unified data model and how we are converging our challenges between work packages and working on the cross-domain interoperability framework that is in the core of the WorldFAIR project. So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and also to thank CODATA and RDA for facilitating WorldFAIR, the European Commission and FAPEST for funding, and the WorldFAIR IGAD colleagues and Work Package 10 team, because this is a really a team effort, and it's been really great to work with you all. So Alex, I think I went a little bit faster than I thought, but that's also interesting for us to have more time for discussion. So thanks.
Thanks very much, Debora. So now, any questions? Please feel free to either post in the chat or raise your hand and or even unmute and ask your question. No questions?
I'll have a question if I may. Alex, it's Jeff here. Hi, Deborah. Thanks for the presentation. That was great. I was struck by one of your comments saying that the lack of fairness amongst within data is a real problem for researchers, and we make those sorts of comments all the time. We make those sorts of statements all the time, and I wonder whether we should actually be asking people within the field if it's really a problem, and just to kind of gauge how much of a problem it is, and ask researchers how they feel we should be tackling this. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Yes, thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you also for allowing me for reusing your slides. And well, in my point of view, researchers are all the time reading the colleagues' work and are interested on the data that the colleagues, the peers produce. So that's what I meant about the challenge for researchers. In one hand, because researchers spend a lot of time digging for data and trying to understand it when it's produced by colleagues. And on the other hand, and I think that's what you are asking, is the researcher in the field, it can be challenging to dedicate time to standardize data when you are producing it. But from my own experience, and I think most researchers will agree, if we challenge ourselves to standardize the data and make it more fair as possible, it's also important for our own use, because we tend to forget details about how the data was collected, and if we don't have standardized procedures, the data is there is a risk that the data will be lost. And there is also, we should consider that although it's not a reality yet, as I showed, the data citation is not a reality yet. I think it is changing, so it's the more the researchers share the data, the more the research will be acknowledged and cited. I hope this answers your question. I would like to hear your thoughts too.
Yes, it does. I've sort of got in my mind that maybe we should do a questionnaire, something of people in the field. And that's Reto's just put a comment into the box there to say that it can be very challenging for people outside of the field, so macroecologists who want to use plant-pollinator data, for example. I suppose the basis of my comment was that how often are researchers looking for data that's already been produced, as opposed to going out and collecting their own data? I mean, we see it in network studies, but apart from the network studies, how often are agricultural pollination ecologists looking for what we might term secondary data? It would be nice to gauge the field, to gauge opinions across, because we're assuming that we're speaking for all researchers within this field, and we of course we might not be. I'll shut up now. And I'm glad you reused the slides. You're most welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. I really believe this is what also is all the WorldFAIR project is about. We are talking about the cultural change as well, as Rito mentioned in the chat box. The lack of fairness limit transdisciplinary science. So the whole idea of the WorldFAIR project is to allow for cross domain research. So I'm sure that every researcher that work with pollination are concerned about all the introduction that I just talked about. So it's a major ecosystem service. It's underpins life on Earth. Everybody talks about the bees, the decreasing. So there is an urgency of really preserving this ecosystem service, and there is a huge lack of data. So if you saw the slide I showed on Globi have thousands of records, but it's a tiny little bit of it is pollination. So if we don't mobilize this data, it will be really hard to base our decisions on science. So I'm not sure if I might be sounding naive here, but I hope that with this effort, we can somehow encourage more people to make the data available in a fair way. So that's our challenge now in this next phase of our work package. And hopefully when we have the results, we also committed on having a guide. And the idea is to make standard adoption easier, because we know it is a burden for researchers. I know it won't, it's a large way, and it won't solve all the problems. On the contrary, it's just a small contribution, but I really believe it's something that can encourage more data to be mobilized. And I think it would be interesting to make this like a formal survey with researchers, if that's what you meant. And we can do that in our, when we have the results from the pilot phase. I think we could do a survey and say, hey, we have this, would you use it? Something like that. Let's discuss this further. Thanks.
Debora, we have a raised hand and a few questions in the chat. Should we take the hand first? Marcia, would you like to unmute?
I think she was before the questions. Wasn't. Hello, Marcia.
Hi, Debora. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. It's a great challenge, a big challenge to make to spread this news and engage people in preparing their data to be in the FAIR principle. So the fairness is, we know it's not done by everyone. And how can we engage more people? We are only a small group of people trying to spread this news and trying to convince people to use this data in the FAIR. Oh my God, my cell phone started ringing now. Sorry. And what should be our homework to engage more people in the FAIR principles, in the spreading this data with all the minimum needs to make it more usable and more spreadable. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. I think it really builds on what Jeff just said. I know Marcia is also a pollinator, ecologist, and she's also a team member. So my answer would be similar. I think that we need to start somewhere, and we are doing that. And hopefully, this can help to raise awareness and to facilitate the burden, because it's something that people usually don't have time to do, or are not, the researchers are not really rewarded for making the data available. But it's a process that's changing. If we see 20 years ago, we did not even talk about that so much. So it takes time, but it's something that we are helping to build. I hope this answers your questions.
Yes, thank you.
So, on to the questions in the chat. Mariano is saying, how likely is it that this initiative will be expanded in the future to other agriculturally relevant data, such as plant pest or plant pathogen interactions?
Yes, thanks, Mariana. So if you saw the model, the model led by Salim and the GBIF model, they can be used for any kind of interaction. So we are focusing more on pollination, and the vocabulary is focused on pollination, but it can be expanded in terms of the data model for any interaction. And we need to make an effort also to expand the semantic resources for other kinds of interactions. I have also talked about that within the WorldFAIR project. We have the social health group, and I believe that parasites, it's something that it's very important to explore as well, as we have many diseases that are spread by insects and things like that. So it's something that I hope the universe is unlimited. So I think there's space for working with that as well, with a similar approach.
Thanks, Deborah. Next question is from Max. He's saying, how much do you think people in general are aware of the difference between occurrences and interactions? And to what degree can that be an issue for the wide-scale collection or aggregation of better and eventually fair biodiversity data?
Yeah, I spent quite some time today talking about these differences, because I think most people are not aware of this difference. So I would say that mostly people that work with biodiversity that know the complexities. Otherwise, it's not so obvious. So that's also a challenge for us to express these complexities, and that's why GPF is working on the unified data model. It's a huge model. It's not only for interactions, and that's not the main focus right now for the project. It's on ecological data. And I think that when we test enough the model and make it a reality, so when we go to the GBIF portal or to Globi, we find data that are not only on occurrences, it will be more understandable. But right now, I think it's probably not something that people are aware of. Thanks, Max. Anyone else have questions or comments?
I see Samira just unmuted. Did you want to ask us a question, Samira? Maybe not. Would anyone else like to ask Debora a question?
Well, If not, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll make this available for those that registered but didn't come. Correct, Alex?
Exactly. Yes, thanks everyone. And please remember to join Debora's next webinar on the 28th of September.